I need to get this out because what happened last Friday has been years in the making and I'm not backing down now. My mother retired after 33 years teaching high school English. Big party at my parents' house, about 40 people, the whole extended family plus dad's work friends and mom's teacher colleagues. I'm 36, still invited to family things even though I'm pretty much treated like the screw-up who never got his life together. My older brother Marcus is 41, works in pharmaceutical sales, makes good money, married with 2 kids. Golden child, always has been. My sister Vicky is 33, works in hospital administration, engaged to some guy named David who works in finance. Also golden. I'm the one who supposedly can't hold a job, still asked dad for gas money, got fired from Best Buy for stealing food from the break room 6 years ago. Except that's not actually what happened, but I'll get to that. I showed up to mom's party around 6 on Friday evening, brought a bouquet of mixed flowers from the grocery store. Nothing fancy, maybe $15 worth, just trying to be decent. I walked in through the front door, said hello to a few relatives in the living room, made my way to the kitchen where Mom was arranging appetizers with Vicky and her friend Marley. Mom looked at the flowers in my hand. I held them out to her, told her congratulations on her retirement. She took them, looked at them for a long moment, then turned to face the entire kitchen full of people. She held the flowers up high and announced loud enough for everyone to hear that look. Everyone? He thinks $5 grocery store flowers fix being a complete failure for 36 years. The kitchen went quiet for maybe 2 seconds. Then Marcus, who was leaning against the counter with a beer, started laughing. He said something about whether I used food stamps to buy them. A few of Dad's friends chuckled. Vicky added that I still thought they wanted me there and it was actually sad. I stood there holding nothing, because Mom had already set the flowers down on the counter like they were contaminated. Dad walked into the kitchen right then, raised his glass of bourbon, and made this big toast to his wife who had 1 successful son and one who still borrows gas money at his age. More laughter. One of Dad's friends, some guy named Jackson who I'd met maybe twice, asked if I was the one who got fired from Best Buy. Mom nodded, said yes, for stealing food from the break room, like it was this hilarious punchline she'd been waiting to deliver all night. Everyone exploded, full-on laughter, people slapping their knees. Someone said something about how I probably stole the flowers too. I smiled, set the flowers down on the counter next to where Mom had dropped them, walked out through the living room past more relatives who had heard the commotion and were grinning at me, got in my car and drove home to my apartment. Here's what they don't know, what I've spent 6 years building toward, what I've been waiting for them to push me far enough to actually use. 6 years ago I was 29, working at Best Buy in the mobile phone section, making okay money but nothing impressive. I was dating this girl Carrie. We'd been together for about 8 months talking about moving in together. I was over at my parents' house one Sunday afternoon, helping Dad install a new ceiling fan in the guest bedroom. Mom, Marcus, and Vicky were all downstairs in the kitchen. I came down to grab some water and walked into the middle of a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Mom was telling Marcus and Vicky about how I'd been taking food from the Best Buy break room, how management had talked to me about it, how she was so embarrassed that her son was stealing food like some kind of desperate vagrant. Marcus said I was pathetic, always had been. Vicky agreed, said Carrie was way too good for me and would figure it out eventually. Except none of that was true. I had never stolen anything from Best Buy. There had been no conversation with management. The whole thing was completely made up. But Mom was telling it like established fact, and Marcus and Vicky were eating it up, using it as more evidence that I was the family disappointment. I stood in the doorway for maybe 30 seconds, just listening. Then I walked back upstairs without saying anything, finished helping Dad with the fan, and went home. That night I broke up with Carrie because I realized my own family had been poisoning every relationship I tried to build. 2 weeks later I quit Best Buy, not because I was fired, but because I got a job offer from a tech startup doing customer service and account management. That startup got acquired 4 years ago. I got stock options as part of my compensation package when I was promoted to senior account manager. When the acquisition went through, those options were worth $240,000 after taxes. I've been living off my regular salary, investing the stock money carefully, building it up. I now have just over $318,000 in various accounts. I also own property. 2 years ago, I bought a duplex in a decent neighborhood as an investment property. I live in one unit, rent out the other. The rental income covers most of my mortgage. Property's worth about $410,000, now based on recent comps in the area. My family thinks I'm barely scraping by, borrowing gas money from Dad, working some dead-end job. They think this because I've let them think it. Every time I see them, I dress down, drive my older car, never talk about work in any detail, occasionally mention being tight on money. I've played the role they assigned me because I've been waiting for them to go too far, to push hard enough that I could justify what I've been planning to do. Friday night was that moment. See, here's the thing they also don't know. 3 years ago, Dad needed someone to co-sign on a refinance of their house. He'd had some credit issues, nothing major but enough that the bank wanted a co-signer with better credit. Marcus refused, said his own mortgage and his kids' future college funds meant he couldn't take on any additional liability. Vicky had just gotten engaged and was planning a wedding. Also refused? Dad asked me. I was the screw-up son, the one who supposedly had nothing going for me. But I also had excellent credit because I'd been meticulous about building it. I agreed to co-sign, went to the bank with him, signed all the papers, helped him refinance their house to a lower interest rate that saved them about $400 a month on their mortgage payment. They never thanked me properly. Dad mentioned it once, said he appreciated it, then never brought it up again. Mom acted like it was the least I could do, after being such a disappointment my entire life. Marcus and Vicky didn't even acknowledge it. But I'm on that mortgage. Legal cosigner, which means I have certain rights regarding the property. And I've spent the last 3 years keeping meticulous records of every payment, every communication, every instance of them treating me like garbage while I was literally helping keep their house afloat. Friday night, after I got home from the party, I sat in my apartment and made a list, documented every major humiliation over the past 6 years. Every time they'd told the Best Buy stealing story to people, every time they'd introduced me to someone as their disappointment son, every family gathering where they'd made me the punchline. It's a long list. Then I started making phone calls, left messages with 3 different real estate attorneys whose names I'd already researched months ago, sent emails to 2 property management companies I'd been in contact with before, pulled up all my documentation regarding the co-signed mortgage, all the paperwork from 3 years ago, all the records of my own financial standing. I'm not going to just walk away and let them keep treating me like this. I'm not going to forgive them or try to repair anything. I've spent 6 years getting into position for this, building up resources, making sure I had leverage, waiting for them to hand me the perfect justification. Saturday morning, one of the attorneys called me back. Her name is Monica. She specializes in property law and co-signer rights. We talked for 45 minutes. She confirmed what I already knew. As a co-signer on their mortgage with an excellent payment history and strong financial standing, I have options. Legal options that are going to make their lives very complicated very quickly. Monday morning, I'm meeting with her in person to start the process. I'm also meeting with a financial advisor to discuss the best way to structure what I'm about to do. Marcus texted me Saturday afternoon asking if I was still mad about Mom's jokes at the party. He said I needed to lighten up, that it was all in good fun, that I was being too sensitive. I didn't respond. Vicky called me Sunday evening. She left a voicemail saying I was being dramatic by leaving the party early, that Mom had been stressed about retirement and didn't mean anything by it, that I should call her back so we could talk about it like adults. I haven't responded to her either. Mom and Dad haven't reached out at all. Why would they? In their minds, they were just telling the truth about their failure son who brought cheap flowers and probably stole those too. They have no idea what's coming. They think I'm the family screw-up who's going to slink back eventually, apologize for being too sensitive, accept my role as the disappointment, and everything will go back to normal. But I've been building toward this for 6 years. I've been waiting for them to give me the exact ammunition I needed. And Friday night, in front of 40 people, they handed it to me. I'm not the person they think I am. I'm not broke. I'm not barely surviving. I'm not the failure they've spent 3 decades telling everyone I am. And they're about to find out exactly who I actually am and what I'm capable of when I stop playing the role they assigned me. Update 1. Monday afternoon, and I'm sitting in my apartment trying to process the absolute chaos of the last 72 hours because this has escalated way faster than I expected, and I need to get it all down before the next wave hits. The meeting with Monica, the attorney, happened Monday morning at 9. Her office is in a professional building downtown. Nothing fancy, but legitimate. I brought all my documentation, the original mortgage refinance paperwork from 3 years ago, my cosigner agreement, records showing I've never missed a payment notification, my own financial statements, property records for my duplex, everything. Monica spent 20 minutes reviewing it all while I sat across from her desk. Then she looked up and told me I had 3 viable options as a cosigner with strong financial standing and payment history. Option 1. I could demand to be released from the cosigner obligation, which would require my parents to refinance again without me. And given Dad's credit situation, that would likely mean a higher interest rate or possibly not qualifying at all. Option 2. I could assert my right to protect my financial interest in the property by forcing a sale if I believed the primary borrowers were putting my credit at risk or mismanaging the asset. Option 3, and this is the one that made me sit up straighter, I could exercise my co-signer rights to assume the mortgage entirely if I could demonstrate that I was the more financially stable party and the primary borrowers had engaged in behavior that justified such action. She explained that option 3 was the nuclear option, the one that would require significant legal maneuvering and documentation of financial responsibility versus irresponsibility. But it was technically possible given my position. It would essentially mean taking over their house, forcing them to either buy me out at current market value or vacate. I asked how long something like that would take. She said it depends on how much they fight it. Could be anywhere from 3 months to a year, but the initial filing alone would put enormous pressure on them immediately because once legal action is filed regarding a co-signed mortgage, it becomes public record and affects their ability to do anything else with the property. I told her I wanted to start with option 1, demanding release from co-signer obligation, but keeping options 2 and 3 ready if they refuse to cooperate. She said that was smart, gave them a chance to resolve it reasonably before going scorched earth. We spent another 30 minutes drafting a formal letter to my parents, legal language about requesting release from co-signer obligation within 30 days, requiring them to provide proof of refinancing ability or alternative arrangements. Monica said she'd send it certified mail that afternoon, so they'd have it by Wednesday at the latest. I left her office feeling vindicated and terrified at the same time because this was real now, not just something I'd been planning in my head for 6 years. The meeting with the financial advisor happened at 2 that afternoon. Guy named Elijah, recommended by Monica, specializes in asset protection and strategic financial planning. I laid out everything for him: my investment accounts, the duplex, my current salary, my goals for the next 5 years. Elijah told me that if I ended up taking over my parents' house through option 3, I'd be in a strong position to either keep it as a second rental property or force a sale and walk away with a significant chunk of equity. Their house is worth around $530,000 based on current market comps. They owe about $290,000 on the mortgage. That's $240,000 in equity that I could potentially claim a portion of as the co-signer who'd protected the asset. He also warned me that my family would fight this harder than I probably expected, that money and property brings out the absolute worst in people, and I should be prepared for them to make this as ugly as possible. I told him I was counting on it. By the time I got home Monday evening, I had 6 missed calls and 12 text messages. 3 calls from Vicky, 2 from Marcus, 1 from Dad. Messages ranged from confused to angry to demanding. Vicky's texts started reasonable. She wanted to know why I was being so distant, why I wouldn't return her calls, whether something was seriously wrong or if I was just throwing a tantrum about the party. Then they got more aggressive. She said I was acting like a child, that Mom had been joking, that everyone was worried about me but also frustrated that I was making everything about me again. That last part stuck with me. Making everything about me again. Like I was the problem for being humiliated in front of 40 people. Marcus's texts were more direct. He said I needed to get over myself, that if I couldn't take a joke then maybe I shouldn't come to family events, that Mom and Dad were getting older and didn't need me stirring up drama over nothing. He said I should apologize to Mom for walking out and making her retirement party about my hurt feelings. Dad's text was short, just said we need to talk, call me. I didn't respond to any of them Monday night. Watched TV, ate leftover pizza, tried to prepare myself for what was coming. Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 7. Mom, I almost didn't answer, but something told me this conversation needed to happen before they got the legal letter on Wednesday. I picked up. Mom's voice was tight, controlled angry instead of yelling angry. She told me that Vicky had called her Monday night very upset about my behavior, that everyone was concerned I was having some kind of breakdown, that my refusal to communicate was immature and hurtful. I let her talk for about 2 minutes. Then I interrupted and asked her directly why she told people I stole food from Best Buy when that never happened. Silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then Mom said she didn't know what I was talking about, that of course it happened, that I'd told her about it myself years ago. I told her that was a lie. I'd never stolen anything from Best Buy, had never been spoken to by management, had quit that job for a better opportunity. I reminded her that I'd heard her telling Marcus and Vicky that story 6 years ago, in the kitchen, that I'd been standing right there, that she knew it wasn't true. Mom's voice changed, got defensive. She said I must have misunderstood, that she'd gotten the details confused, that it didn't matter now anyway because that was years ago, and everyone makes mistakes. Then she pivoted Said the real issue was me embarrassing her at the retirement party by leaving early and making everything awkward. I asked her why she announced to a room full of people that I was a complete failure for 36 years. Why she let Marcus make the food stamps comment. Why she agreed when Dad's friend asked if I was the one who got fired for stealing. Mom said she was just joking, that I've always been too sensitive, that the family has always teased each other and I'm the only one who can't handle it. She said Marcus and Vicky both take jokes fine, that I needed to learn to laugh at myself. I told her there's a difference between teasing and public humiliation, that what happened Friday night wasn't a joke, it was cruelty. Mom got quiet again. Then she said something that made everything click into place. She said that maybe if I'd actually accomplished something with my life like Marcus and Vicky, there wouldn't be anything to joke about. That she's proud of Marcus for providing for his family and proud of Vicky for her career. But what exactly was she supposed to be proud of with me? That I work some job nobody understands and live in a rundown apartment? And there it was. The real reason. Not that I'd actually failed at anything, but that my success didn't look like the kind of success she could brag about to her teacher friends. Marcus had the pharmaceutical sales job with the company car and the visible lifestyle. Vicky had the hospital administration title and the finance fiancé. I had money and property, but I kept it quiet, so in her mind it didn't count. I told her I co-signed her mortgage 3 years ago when Marcus and Vicky refused. I told her my credit was the only reason she and Dad got the refinance that saved them $400 a month. I asked her if that counted as accomplishment. Another long silence. Then Mom said that was different. That was family helping family. That it didn't change the fact that I'd spent most of my adult life underachieving and making poor choices. I almost laughed, almost told her right then about the attorney, about the letter coming Wednesday, about what I was about to do. But I held back because I wanted her to get that letter cold, wanted her to realize what she'd done without any warning. I told Mom I had to go. She started saying we needed to resolve this, that she wanted me to come over for dinner Wednesday night so we could talk everything through as a family. I said I'd think about it. Hung up. Tuesday afternoon, Marcus called. I answered. He launched right in, said Mom had called him crying, that I'd upset her by bringing up ancient history about Best Buy and making accusations, that I was being unreasonable and needed to let things go. I asked Marcus if he remembered telling people at the party that I used food stamps to buy flowers. He said it was just a joke, that I needed to stop being so sensitive. I asked him if he knew that story about me stealing from Best Buy was completely fabricated. He said it didn't matter, that it was years ago, that the point was I'd spent most of my adult life failing, and that was what the jokes were about. I told him I make $73,000 a year in my current position, own a $400,000 duplex, and have over $300,000 in investments and savings. He went completely silent, then said I was lying. There was no way I had that kind of money. If I did, why would I dress like I shopped at discount stores and drive a 12-year-old sedan and ask Dad for gas money? I told him because that's what the family wanted me to be, so I let them believe it. But the truth was I'd been successful for years, while they'd all been treating me like garbage, and I was done pretending. Marcus said this was insane, that if I had money I would have told someone, that I was clearly making this up to get attention. Then he said something that made me realize how deep this went. He said Mom and Dad had always worried about me, had always tried to help me even though I kept screwing up. And this was how I repaid them? By lying about having money and attacking Mom when she was just trying to enjoy her retirement? I asked him when exactly Mom and Dad had tried to help me. He said Dad gave me gas money. I told him Dad gave me $20 one time 2 years ago when I mentioned my tank was low. And I'd been playing that up ever since as part of maintaining the illusion they all needed. Marcus said I was sick, that I needed professional help, that making up stories about being secretly wealthy was delusional behavior. Then he hung up on me. Wednesday morning at 10, Monica texted that the certified letter had been delivered and signed for by my mother. I waited. 2 hours passed. Nothing. Then at 1:15 my phone started blowing up. Dad calling, Mom calling, Marcus calling, Vicky calling, all within 5 minutes of each other. I let them all go to voicemail. Waited 20 minutes. Checked the voicemails. Dad's message was confused and angry. He wanted to know what kind of legal nonsense I was pulling, whether I'd actually hired an attorney to go after them over a mortgage I'd voluntarily co-signed 3 years ago, whether I understood how family-destroying this kind of action was. Mom's message was crying, actual sobbing, saying she didn't understand what was happening, that she'd gotten some letter about co-signer release, that this couldn't be real, that I couldn't actually be doing this to them. Marcus's message was rage. Pure rage. He said I was out of my mind, that going after Mom and Dad's house was the lowest thing he'd ever heard of, that co-signers don't have the right to just take over property, that whatever attorney I'd hired was scamming me. Vicky's message was the most interesting. She was trying to sound reasonable, but I could hear the panic. She said we needed to talk immediately, that whatever was going on could be resolved without lawyers, that family doesn't sue family, that there had to be some misunderstanding about the letter. I didn't call any of them back. Texted them all one group message, told them that I'd requested release from cosigner obligation on their mortgage, and they had 30 days to refinance without me or make alternative arrangements. Said this was non-negotiable and that all further communication should go through my attorney. Sent Monica's office contact information. My phone rang immediately, all four of them calling at once. I turned it off, sat in my apartment with my laptop open to my bank accounts, looking at numbers I'd spent 6 years building, and wondered if they finally understood that I wasn't the person they'd spent 3 decades telling everyone I was. Thursday morning, I turned my phone back on. 23 missed calls, 37 text messages, 2 voicemails from numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails were from Aunt Carrie, Mom's sister, asking me to please call her about this situation with my parents. The other was from someone named Marley, apparently Vicky's friend from the party, asking if we could meet up to discuss what was happening because Vicky was beside herself. Extended family was getting involved. The story was spreading, and based on Aunt Carrie's voicemail asking me to reconsider destroying my parents' financial security over a disagreement, they were getting Mom and Dad's version of events. This was about to get so much worse before it got better. Update 2. It's been 9 days since I sent that legal letter, and I need to update. Because this situation has gone completely sideways in ways I didn't fully anticipate, and I'm realizing just how deep the dysfunction in my family actually runs. Thursday afternoon, after I got those voicemails from Aunt Carrie and Marley, I decided to call Aunt Carrie back because she's always been relatively decent to me, and I figured she deserved to hear my side before the family poisoned her completely against me. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was strained, careful. She said Mom had called her Wednesday night absolutely hysterical about me trying to take their house, that she didn't understand what was happening, but surely there was some way to work this out without lawyers and legal threats. I spent 20 minutes explaining the entire situation to her, the retirement party humiliation, the 6 years of the fabricated Best Buy theft story, the co-signing 3 years ago that nobody appreciated, the fact that I'd been successful this whole time while they treated me like a failure. Everything. Aunt Carrie got very quiet. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. She said Mom had been telling the Best Buy story for 6 years to everyone, not just at family gatherings, but to church friends, to her teacher colleagues, to neighbors. She said Mom had called me her disappointment son so many times that Aunt Carrie had just accepted it as fact, had never questioned whether any of it was true. Then Aunt Carrie said something else. She said 3 years ago when I co-signed the mortgage, Mom had told her it was because I owed them money and this was how I was paying it back, that I'd borrowed thousands from them over the years and they'd finally found a way to make me useful. I sat there in my apartment completely silent because that was a new lie I hadn't even known about. I'd never borrowed money from them. The gas money thing 2 years ago was $20 that I'd never asked for. Dad had just handed it to me. But Mom had apparently constructed this entire narrative where I was financially dependent on them, and the co-signing was me repaying debt. I told Aunt Carrie that was completely false. She said she believed me because my explanation made sense and Mom's story had always seemed off. Then she said she couldn't get involved, that this was between me and my parents, but she hoped we could find a resolution that didn't destroy the family. I thanked her for listening and hung up. Spent the next hour just staring at my wall, trying to process how many lies Mom had apparently told about me over the years. Friday morning, Monica called. She said my parents had contacted her office Thursday afternoon wanting to schedule a meeting. She'd told them she only represented me, but they could retain their own attorney and the attorneys could communicate. They'd apparently refused, said they didn't need an attorney because this was just a family misunderstanding. Monica asked if I wanted to meet with them face-to-face with her present as a mediator. I said absolutely not. She said that was probably smart, that these situations got emotional fast and it was better to keep everything formal and documented. Then she told me something that made me realize my parents were in deeper trouble than I'd thought. She'd had her assistant run a basic financial check on their property as part of standard due diligence. My parents had taken out a home equity line of credit 2 years ago, separate from the mortgage I'd co-signed. They currently owed $47,000 on that HELOC. I asked if that affected anything with the mortgage situation. Monica said it complicated things significantly because it meant their debt-to-equity ratio was worse than the refinance paperwork had indicated, and if they tried to refinance now without me, they'd have to disclose that HELOC, which would make approval even harder. She asked if I'd known about it. I said no. She said that was a problem because as a co-signer, I should have been notified of any additional liens on the property, but it was possible they'd gotten the HELOC through a different lender, who didn't check the existing mortgage details thoroughly. I asked what this meant for my options. Monica said it meant option 1, releasing me from co-signer obligation, was going to be nearly impossible for them to accomplish within 30 days because no bank would refinance them with their current debt load and Dad's credit. Option 2, forcing a sale to protect my interest, became more justified. Option 3, taking over the mortgage entirely, became more complicated but also more potentially lucrative because there was more debt to resolve. I told her to send a follow-up letter informing them that I was aware of the HELOC and considered it a material change to the financial arrangement I'd co-signed for, and that I was considering escalating to option 2 if they couldn't provide a viable refinancing plan within the original 30-day window. Monica said she'd draft it and send it Monday. Friday evening, Vicky showed up at my duplex. Just appeared at my door around 7. I have a doorbell camera, so I saw her standing there before I opened it. She looked exhausted, angry, scared all at once. I opened the door, but I didn't invite her in. She started talking immediately. Said we needed to resolve this tonight. That what I was doing was going to destroy Mom and Dad financially and emotionally. That I couldn't actually be serious about taking legal action over hurt feelings from a party. I told her it wasn't about hurt feelings. It was about 36 years of being treated like garbage, culminating in public humiliation, while I was literally the reason they could afford their mortgage payment. Vicky said I was exaggerating, that families tease each other, that I'd always been oversensitive. I asked her if she knew Mom had been telling people for 6 years that I stole food from Best Buy. She said yes. Everyone knew that story. I told her it never happened. She stared at me like I was speaking another language. I explained the whole thing. How I'd overheard Mom fabricating it 6 years ago. How I'd quit Best Buy for a better job, not been fired. How the entire story was designed to make me look pathetic. Vicky shook her head and said that didn't make sense. That Mom wouldn't just make something like that up. That maybe I'd told her something and she'd misunderstood. I asked Vicky why she said at the party that it was sad I still thought they wanted me there. She said she was just joking around, that I took everything too seriously. I asked her how that was a joke. She didn't have an answer. Just said the whole family was like that and I needed to get thicker skin. Then Vicky shifted tactics. She said Marcus had talked to a lawyer friend who told him that co-signers can't just force someone out of their house. That what I was doing was legally questionable and probably wouldn't hold up. I told her that my attorney, who specializes in property law, disagreed and that I wasn't forcing them out. I was demanding to be released from an obligation they'd begged me to take on while treating me like dirt. Vicky said that if I went through with this, she would never speak to me again. That Marcus would never speak to me again, that I'd be dead to the family. I told her I'd been dead to this family for 36 years. They just hadn't realized I'd stopped caring about their approval. She asked why I'd co-sign the mortgage if I hated them so much. I told her because 3 years ago I still had some hope they might treat me better if I helped them, but I'd been systematically documenting every instance of mistreatment since then, just in case it came to exactly this. Vicky's eyes went wide. She said that was psychotic. That normal people don't document family interactions like that, that I clearly had serious issues. I asked her if normal families publicly humiliate their children at retirement parties. She said I needed therapy and left. Saturday, Marcus showed up at my duplex around 10 in the morning. I saw him on the doorbell camera. He was alone, looked angry. I didn't open the door. He knocked hard, called my name, said he knew I was home because my car was in the driveway. I spoke through the Ring doorbell speaker, told him to leave. He said we needed to talk face-to-face, man-to-man. I said anything he needed to say could be said on camera. That made him angrier. He said I was being ridiculous, that hiding behind cameras and lawyers was coward behavior, that I needed to open the door and have a real conversation. I told him I had nothing to say to him. He stood there for a minute, then said that if I didn't drop this legal nonsense, he was going to make my life hell, that he had connections and could make things very difficult for me, professionally and personally. I told him that sounded like a threat, and I was recording everything, and that threatening someone over a legal property dispute was probably not smart. Marcus kicked my door, not hard enough to damage it, but hard enough to make his point. Then he left. I saved the video footage, sent it to Monica. She said if he showed up again to call the police immediately, that any physical intimidation could be used as evidence that my family was engaging in harassment to prevent me from exercising my legal rights. Sunday afternoon, Mom called from Dad's phone. I almost didn't answer, but I figured I should hear what they had to say. Dad's voice came on, sounded tired and defeated. He said they'd been trying to look into refinancing, but every bank they'd talked to had issues with their debt situation and his credit score. He said the HELOC had been for emergency home repairs 2 years ago, that the furnace had died and the roof needed work and they didn't have the cash on hand. He said they'd planned to pay it down, but Then mom's school had budget cuts that affected her pension payout, and they'd been struggling to keep up with both mortgage payments. I asked why they hadn't told me any of this. Dad said they didn't think it was my business, that I was just a co-signer, not a co-owner. I told him that legally, those were almost the same thing. That major financial decisions affecting a property I'd co-signed for were absolutely my business. Dad asked what I wanted from them, what it would take to make this go away. I said I wanted release from the co-signer obligation, or I wanted full control of the property with them buying out my interest at current market value. Dad said they couldn't afford either of those things. I asked him why Mom told everyone I stole from Best Buy when it never happened. Long silence. Then Dad said Mom had been stressed about my life choices back then, and maybe she'd exaggerated some things, but it was water under the bridge. I said it wasn't water under the bridge when she was still telling that story at her retirement party 6 years later. Dad said that at the party, Mom had just been making jokes, that she loved me and was proud of me despite everything. I asked him what everything meant. He said my lack of ambition, my refusing to pursue a real career, my inability to maintain relationships, my general failure to launch into adult success. And there it was again, their complete inability to see that I had been successful, that I'd built wealth and stability, that I owned property, because success to them only counted if it looked like Marcus's pharmaceutical sales job or Vicky's hospital administration title. My quiet accumulation of assets didn't fit their narrative, so they'd simply decided it didn't exist. I told Dad they had 3 weeks left on the 30-day deadline to figure out refinancing. He said 3 weeks wasn't enough time. I said that wasn't my problem. He hung up. Monday morning, Monica sent the follow-up letter about the HELOC. Monday afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Answered it. Voice on the other end introduced himself as Robert, Dad's older brother, who I'd met maybe 5 times in my entire life at various family events. Uncle Robert said he'd heard about the situation with the house, that Mom and Dad were devastated, that family was supposed to stick together through hard times. I asked him how much of the actual story he'd heard. He said he'd heard I was trying to force my parents out of their house over a disagreement about my life choices. I spent 15 minutes explaining my side. The lies, the humiliation, the co-signing they never appreciated, the HELOC they never disclosed. Everything. Uncle Robert listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said that Mom had always been difficult, that even when she and Dad first got married, she'd had a cruel streak. But family was family, and surely there was a way to work this out. I told him I'd given them a way to work it out. Refinance without me within 30 days. They couldn't do it. So now we were moving to harder options. Uncle Robert said he might be willing to help them financially if it meant keeping the family together. I told him that was between him and them. But it didn't change my position. He said I was making a mistake that I'd regret. I said I'd regretted co-signing that mortgage for 3 years. And I was done with regrets. Tuesday, Monica called with an update. She said my parents had hired an attorney finally, some guy who'd apparently told them that co-signers have limited rights, and they could probably fight this successfully. Monica said that was partially true, that co-signer rights vary by state and situation, but that my strong financial position plus their undisclosed HELOC, plus my documentation of their treatment gave me a much stronger case than they apparently understood. She asked if I wanted to proceed to option 2, formally demanding property sale to protect my financial interest. I told her yes. She said she'd start the paperwork and it would be filed by end of week. I asked what that would do to them. Monica said it would freeze any ability they had to sell, refinance, or take out additional credit against the house until the legal dispute was resolved. It would tank their credit scores. It would become public record that their property was in legal dispute, which would affect everything from insurance rates to their ability to get approved for any other loans. Basically, it would make their lives extremely complicated financially, while we worked through the legal process of either forcing a sale or forcing them to buy out my interest. I told her to file it. Wednesday morning, I woke up to 43 text messages from various family members. Apparently, Mom and Dad had sent out some kind of mass message to everyone, explaining that I was trying to steal their house, that I'd hired a lawyer to exploit them after they'd helped me for years, that I was mentally unstable and possibly dangerous based on Marcus's interaction with me. The messages from cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends ranged from concerned to hostile. Multiple people asking what was wrong with me. Several people saying I needed to get help. A few saying they couldn't believe I'd attack my own parents this way. One cousin named Elijah, who I'd always gotten along with, said he didn't know what the truth was. But it seemed like there had to be more to the story, and if I wanted to talk, he'd listen. I didn't respond to any of them, except Elijah. Told him I'd explain everything if he was actually willing to listen. He said he was. We're supposed to meet at a sports bar Thursday evening, and I'm going to lay out the whole situation for him, Because if I'm going to be painted as the villain in the family story, I want at least one person to know what actually happened. Monica filed the option 2 paperwork Wednesday afternoon. My parents should get notification by Friday. And then things are really going to escalate because once that filing hits, they're going to realize this isn't me bluffing or having a tantrum. This is me systematically dismantling their financial security the way they systematically dismantled my reputation for 36 years. Marcus sent me one more text Wednesday night. Said that when this was over and I realized what I'd done to the family, nobody would be there for me, that I'd be alone. That destroying mom and dad was going to destroy me too. I didn't respond. I just sat in my duplex, my property, that I own outright minus the mortgage, in my life that I built quietly while they all laughed at me, and felt absolutely nothing but cold satisfaction that they were finally understanding I'm not who they thought I was. 3 years ago, I co-signed their mortgage thinking maybe it would earn me some respect. Instead, they kept treating me like garbage. So now they're going to learn what it costs to underestimate someone for 36 years. Final update. It's been 3 weeks since I filed the legal action to force a property sale, and I'm writing this because the situation reached its breaking point last night in exactly the way I'd been planning for 6 years, and I need to document how completely everything fell apart for them. Friday. 2 weeks ago, my parents received official notification of the Option 2 filing. Monica said their attorney called her office within an hour, absolutely furious, saying this was an abuse of co-signer rights and threatening to file counter-motions. Monica told him to go ahead, that we had extensive documentation of undisclosed liens, financial mismanagement, and my legitimate interest in protecting my credit standing. That afternoon, Mom called me 17 times. Dad called 12. Marcus called 8. Vicky called 6. I didn't answer any of them. Around 7 that evening, they all showed up at my duplex together. All 4 of them standing on my front porch visible through the doorbell camera. I didn't open the door. Spoke through the ring system. Asked what they wanted. Mom started crying immediately, saying I couldn't do this to them. That forcing a sale of their house would destroy them. That they had nowhere to go. Dad said they'd lived in that house for 28 years. That it was their retirement security, that I was taking away everything they'd built. I told them they should have thought about that before spending 6 years telling everyone I stole food from Best Buy, before humiliating me at Mom's retirement party in front of 40 people, before treating me like a failure for 36 years while I was quietly building wealth they couldn't even comprehend. Marcus said I was being vindictive and cruel, that this was about revenge, not justice. I told him he was absolutely right. This was 100% about revenge, and they'd earned every bit of it. Vicky said I was destroying the family over hurt feelings. I told her I was destroying them financially, the same way they'd destroyed me emotionally for 3 decades. Dad said if I went through with the forced sale, they'd lose at least $100,000 in equity because they'd have to sell quickly and couldn't wait for best market conditions. I said that sounded like their problem. Mom collapsed onto my porch steps, sobbing. Marcus tried my door handle. I told him I had cameras recording everything, and if he tried to force entry, I'd call the police. They stood there for another 10 minutes with Mom crying and Dad trying to reason with me through the camera system, and Marcus pacing around looking like he wanted to break something, and Vicky just staring at the camera with this expression of complete disbelief. Finally, they left. I watched them get into Marcus's vehicle and drive away. Saved all the footage. Sent it to Monica. Thursday evening. Last week, I met cousin Elijah at a sports bar about 20 minutes from my place. He'd texted earlier asking if I was still willing to talk, and I figured having one family member who knew the truth couldn't hurt. Elijah is 42, works in manufacturing management, has always been pretty straightforward. He showed up in work clothes, ordered a beer, said he'd heard approximately 5 different versions of what was happening and wanted to hear mine. I spent 45 minutes walking him through everything. The overhead conversation 6 years ago where Mom fabricated the Best Buy story. The co-signing 3 years ago that nobody appreciated. The retirement party humiliation. The 6 years of deliberate image management where I let them think I was failing while I built wealth specifically so I'd have leverage when they inevitably pushed too far. The legal action. The HELOC they never disclosed. All of it. Elijah listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat back and said that explained a lot of things that had never made sense about family gatherings. About the way Mom talked about me versus the way she talked about Marcus and Vicky. He said he'd always thought the family dynamic was weird, but hadn't realized how calculated it was. Then he asked me what my endgame was. I told him I wanted them to understand that I wasn't the person they'd decided I was 36 years ago. That treating someone like garbage for their entire life has consequences. That you can't humiliate someone publicly and expect them to just keep taking it. Elijah asked if I was actually going to force the sale or if this was just pressure to make them apologize. I told him I was absolutely going to force the sale unless they could come up with $200,000 cash to buy out my co-signer interest at current market equity rates, which we both knew they couldn't do. He said the family was going to turn on me completely if I went through with it. I said they'd already turned on me 36 years ago. I just hadn't realized it until 6 years ago. And now I was done pretending it mattered. Elijah said he understood my position even if he thought it was going to leave me isolated. I told him I'd rather be isolated and wealthy than accepted and humiliated. We finished our drinks. He said he'd stay neutral in the family drama, but if I needed someone to verify my version of events, he'd tell the truth about this conversation. I appreciated that. Monday this week, Monica called with an update that changed everything. She said my parents' attorney had filed a motion arguing that I couldn't force a sale because I'd voluntarily co-signed and had no ownership stake, only liability. Standard defense. But Monica's counter motion included documentation of the undisclosed HELOC, records of my payment reliability versus their increasing debt load, and character testimony about their public statements regarding my supposed financial irresponsibility. More importantly, Monica had discovered something during routine title research. When my parents took out the HELOC 2 years ago, they'd listed only Dad as the borrower on that application and hadn't disclosed the existing mortgage that I'd co-signed. That was a material misrepresentation to the HELOC lender and potentially constituted loan fraud. Monica said she wasn't going to report it as fraud because that would open a whole criminal investigation mess, but she was going to inform my parents' attorney that we'd discovered this discrepancy, and if they wanted to avoid it becoming an issue, they needed to settle immediately. I asked what settlement meant. Monica said it meant them agreeing to either refinance within 90 days with a concrete plan and bank commitment letter, or agreeing to sell the property with me receiving my proportional share of equity as the co-signer who'd protected the asset, or agreeing to a buyout number that we'd determine based on current market assessment. She sent the information to their attorney Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, their attorney had called, asking to schedule a settlement conference. Wednesday afternoon, I met with Monica at her office to prep for the settlement conference scheduled for Friday. She said my parents were in a corner financially. They couldn't refinance with their debt load. They couldn't afford a buyout. Their only option was to agree to sell the property, and the question was whether they'd do it cooperatively or whether we'd have to force it through court, which would take months and cost everyone more money. I told Monica I wanted them to agree to the sale, list it within 60 days, and understand that their financial destruction was a direct result of how they'd treated me. She said the law didn't care about my emotional satisfaction, but that the practical outcome would be the same, regardless. Thursday morning, Mom called from an unknown number. I answered because I figured it was time to hear what they had to say now that they understood how serious this was. Mom's voice was wrecked, sounded like she'd been crying for days. She said they'd talked to their attorney, that he'd explained they had no good options, that they were going to lose the house. She said they'd lived in that house for 28 years, raised 3 kids there, had every memory there. I told her they should have thought about that before spending 6 years destroying my reputation with lies. She said the Best Buy thing was a misunderstanding, that she genuinely thought I'd told her that story. I said that was impossible because it never happened, and she knew it. Mom tried a different approach, said that even if she'd made mistakes, Dad didn't deserve to lose his home, that Dad had worked his entire life to provide for the family. I asked her if Dad had worked harder than me. Silence. I asked her if Dad's career was more valuable than mine, just because it looked more traditional. More silence. Then Mom said something that made me realize how deep the dysfunction went. She said that Marcus had always been easy, that he'd made choices that made sense, that he'd given her grandchildren and a life story she could talk about proudly with her teacher friends. She said Vicky had always been ambitious and driven and easy to be proud of, but I'd always been difficult, had always made choices she didn't understand, had always seemed to be underachieving relative to my potential. I asked her what choices I'd made that were so difficult. She couldn't answer, because there weren't any. I'd just lived my life quietly, built wealth methodically, not given her the visible markers of success she could brag about. So she'd decided I was failing and constructed a narrative to match. I told her the settlement conference was Friday, and she should show up prepared to agree to list the house. She started crying again, said I was destroying them. I said they'd been destroying me for 36 years and turnabout was fair. Hung up. Friday morning, the settlement conference happened at Monica's office. My parents showed up with their attorney, a guy in his 50s named David who looked exhausted. I sat on one side of the conference table with Monica. They sat on the other side with David. David started by saying this situation was unfortunate and that families should resolve disputes internally rather than through legal action. Monica shut that down immediately, said we were here to discuss property settlement, not family therapy. David laid out their position. They acknowledged they couldn't refinance or afford a buyout. They were requesting 12 months to sell the property so they could find something else to buy and not end up homeless. Monica countered with 90 days and them signing a listing agreement within 30 days with a realtor we'd mutually approve. Dad tried to argue they needed time. Monica said every month they delayed was a month I was exposed to liability on a mortgage for a property I didn't live in or control, and that wasn't acceptable. She said 90 days was generous given that I could force an immediate sale through court order. Mom started crying again. Said 90 days wasn't enough time to find a new place, that they'd been planning to live in that house through retirement, that this was cruel. I spoke for the first time and said spending 6 years telling people I stole food when it never happened was cruel. Telling me to my face at her retirement party that I was a complete failure was cruel. They'd had 36 years to treat me decently and chose not to. They had 90 days to vacate the house. Marcus had shown up at the conference even though he wasn't party to the legal situation. He was sitting behind our parents in one of the extra chairs. He stood up and said I was being unreasonable, that I was letting anger control me, that I was making a decision I'd regret. I told him he'd threatened me at my home and I had video evidence. And if he wanted to be involved in legal proceedings, I could make that happen. Monica told Marcus to sit down or leave. He left. David tried one more angle, said that if we forced this sale, my parents would net maybe $350,000 after paying off the mortgage and HELOC and realtor fees, which wasn't enough for them to buy another house in this market, meaning they'd have to rent at their age. Monica said that sounded like the consequence of taking out a HELOC without properly disclosing their existing mortgage situation and generally mismanaging their finances. Dad said they'd taken out the HELOC for emergency repairs. Monica said lots of people have emergency repairs and don't end up in legal disputes with their co-signers. And the difference was they'd spent years mistreating the person who'd helped them while running up additional debt. The conference lasted 2 hours. At the end, my parents agreed to list the house within 30 days, agreed to a 90-day sale timeline, with me receiving my proportional co-signer protection share, which Monica calculated at around $47,000 based on equity protection and liability exposure, agreed that all proceeds after paying their debts would go to them to find new housing. David made them sign the agreement right there. Mom was crying the entire time. Dad's hands were shaking as he signed. When it was done, they left without looking at me. I sat in Monica's office afterward and she said this was the best outcome I could have hoped for, that I'd be released from the co-signer obligation within 90 days and would walk away with around $50,000 while they'd have to completely restructure their retirement plans. Last night at 3 in the morning, they showed up at my duplex again. All 4 of them. Mom, Dad, Marcus, Vicky. I saw them on the doorbell camera. They looked destroyed. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying. Dad looked 10 years older than 3 weeks ago. They started knocking, then pounding, then yelling. Mom was screaming that she was sorry, that they were all sorry, that please I had to open the door, that they were begging me. Dad was yelling that they'd made mistakes, but destroying them wasn't the answer, that families forgive each other. Marcus was demanding I be a man and face them. Vicky was crying and saying this was killing Mom. I sat in my living room watching them through the camera feed on my phone. Listened to them beg and cry and demand and threaten. Watched Mom collapse against my door saying, please God, we're sorry, we're begging you, don't do this. After 20 minutes, they left. My neighbors probably called the cops, but nobody showed up. I saved all the footage. This morning, Monica texted asking if I was okay, because their attorney had called her at 7 saying my parents were having a breakdown and asking if there was any way to reverse the settlement. Monica told him the agreement was signed and binding, and we'd be monitoring the listing timeline. I'm sitting in my duplex now, the one I own, looking at my bank accounts showing over $300,000 in investments that I built while they told everyone I was stealing food. And I feel absolutely nothing except satisfaction. They spent 6 years telling people I stole from Best Buy. They humiliated me at Mom's retirement party. They treated me like garbage for 36 years while I co-signed their mortgage and helped keep their life stable. They had Uncle Robert and Aunt Carrie and half the family calling me mentally unstable for standing up for myself. Now they're losing their house. They're scrambling to find rental housing in their 60s. Their retirement security is gone. Their family reputation is destroyed because everyone's going to know they had to sell because of a legal dispute with their son. Marcus and Vicky are going to have to help them financially, which means the Golden children get to experience some consequences too. And I'm walking away with my co-signer obligation cleared. Around $50,000, my duplex, my investments, and the certain knowledge that nobody in that family will ever underestimate me again. They thought I was the failure son, the disappointment, the one who stole food and borrowed gas money and couldn't get his life together. They were so invested in that story they never looked at what I was actually doing with my life. Last night they were outside my door begging me to save them, apologizing, crying, screaming, and I did exactly what I'd been planning to do for 6 years. I watched them through my camera system and did absolutely nothing. Because the family disappointment doesn't bail out the people who spent 3 decades telling everyone he's worthless. The screw-up son doesn't save the parents who humiliated him in front of 40 people. The failure doesn't rescue anyone. They wanted me to be the family disappointment for 36 years. Now they get to live with the consequences of what happens when the disappointment stops playing the role they assigned him and shows them exactly who he actually is.